When you hear the name Robert De Niro, you think of one of our greatest actors, but there was another man by that name who was a very talented painter. It was his father. Robert De Niro Sr. was part of the New York School alongside fellow artists like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko. His work was exhibited by Peggy Guggenheim. Though he never gained the popular recognition that his other contemporaries enjoyed, art historians consider him a deep talent. A new documentary for HBO focuses on the life and work of a painter who many believe went unnoticed. Here is the trailer for Remembering the Artist, Robert De Niro Sr.
My father created all this beautiful artwork. He was the real thing. He was, to me, a great artist, but you can never impose that on people. My father felt he was different, and he was different, not only as an artist, for other reasons. He was very particular about what art is. Part of recognition is luck. Artists are always recognized after they're long gone. I just want to see him get his due. That's my responsibility.
Joining me now is the director, Perry Peltz, and Robert De Niro, the artist's son. I am pleased to have them at this table. My first question is, how come you and you get together?
Well, I was always wanting to do a documentary about my father, just as a documentation, not as a documentary the way it's now, which is great. But for the family, for my kids who didn't know their grandfather, and so I kept the studio for years, as you see in the documentary. I kept it till now and still have it, and I wanted them to see what their grandfather did. And so Jane Rosenthal and I were talking over the years about this, and finally,
this is your partner in Tribeca.
Yes, Jane said, let's do it now. And she knows Perry, and I knew Perry a little bit, but they were their friends. And she said, let's ask Perry if she'll do it, and Geeta and so on. And that's how it started. And we finally did it. And someone had, as you see, some footage there had been done by a guy in the 70s who followed my father around, and he contacted me, and I bought it from him. And so I wanted to use, I gave them that, and we just went on this journey, if you will.
So how did you approach this request?
You know, it has been a journey, because initially when Jane and Bob came to my partner, Geeta, and myself, it was really not necessarily something that was going to ultimately be broadcast. It was going to initially be something that was for the family. And I think that what happened along the way is we all came to the conclusion that this was a story that was more than just about one man. It was about an artist, a wonderful artist, at an interesting moment in American art history, where the world went from one kind of painting to first abstract art and then pop art. And for the figurative painters of that time, that was a difficult transition. And so Robert De Niro Sr., who was a wonderful painter, was one of many that had kind of been overlooked. So it really became a process, and finally realizing that there was a story here, not only a father-son story, but an art story and a story about the meaning of fame. So that was process.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you feel that not only is this for your grandchildren, but also, in a sense, for those who might not have appreciated your father, they will now know what he did?
Yeah, I mean, it's all those things. That's also absolutely a plus. Anybody who's not aware of him now will be aware of him. Whoever watches the documentary, yeah.
Bob, is it also saying to your father in any way, this is homage to you, but also it is a sense of a kind of, I wish we'd had more time together. I wish we spent more time together. I wish. Well, that like all kids feel at some point in their life, I wish I'd spend more time.
Well, I say that in the documentary. I wish that, because I was busy with my own life and this and that, and so I wish I'd done certain things. I wish I'd done the documentary 10, 15 years earlier and included my mother in it, and other contemporaries of my father, but this is what it is. I'm lucky that I at least got and did it at this point. So, and that my kids can see it, my younger kids especially, because they don't have any recollection. They don't know them.
Okay, let me take a look. This is a clip from you talking about your father. Here it is.
He was the real thing, my father. I see his work, I see how dedicated he was. He was, to me, a great artist. But you can never impose that on people. They have to make their own decisions. The thought of what he's done, all his work, I can't not but make sure that it's held up and remembered. So I just want to see him get his due. That's my responsibility.
Just the reason he didn't get his due was because of where he came, as you were saying, Perry. Was there more than that?
Well, I think that had just, it's a matter of timing sometimes, and what was going on at that time in the art scene, in the art world. It's just he also had left for Europe for a few years, so that might not have been the best time for him to leave, but I still think it was just the real. It's just what it was at that time in the art scene.
Charlie, one of the people that we used on the film, a wonderful man named Irving Sandler, who is an art historian, called that time period a bloodbath when the art world made this shift. And Rob Storr from Yale, another person who we used, who says, and I think really sums it up so well, that the art world turned its gaze elsewhere onto pop art. And it doesn't mean that the figurative painters weren't doing their thing and weren't painting away, but that the attention went elsewhere. And I think that painters like Robert De Niro Sr. got overlooked at that point, although he really did have quite a bit of success in the beginning of his career.
And when we say pop art, we're talking about?
Andy Warhol, Rothko, those types of artists. And not to take anything away from what they were doing, it was a different kind of art than the figurative painters. And I'm sure that to some of them, it didn't make sense, right? They weren't painting in the same style that the figurative painters were doing.
Was this hard for your father?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it was. I mean, he would sometimes talk about it. Yeah, I mean, he felt it, yeah.
He says in one of the clips that, as Bob mentioned, there was some footage, and he says, I suppose I could have gone and done that kind of art, but it didn't make much sense to me. And I think that really kind of sums up what that experience was. He's used to painting figures and painting landscapes, and all of a sudden people are throwing, putting paint on canvases in a very different way. So I think that it was confusing and frustrating for him.
He was in the countryside in central France, and then I visited him when I was 18, hitchhiking through Europe, and then then when I was 19, turning 19, I came back 3 years later. He was now in Paris and sort of in a hotel, not feeling too good about everything, and in a rut, and so I had to get. I said I'm going to send him back. I told him I'm going to send him back, and he was terrified of flying and all that. So he took a boat over, like the Queen Mary. Yeah. So, but I had to literally almost push him on the plane to get him back. But he had to.
But you knew you had to get him back.
Yeah. I didn't go with him. I stayed, but I made him go back.
Here's what your father wrote in his journal. Bobby has always managed to visit me in Europe at the opportune moment to help me through a shock such as the one in Paris and to give me the courage to leave an unbearable situation. It was he who practically pushed me on the plane to return to New York. Thank you, God, for Bobby's having turned out so well. So he appreciated not only a loving son, but also a son who's also an artist.
Well, he appreciated me as his son, just getting him on the plane.
Yeah, but I mean, and appreciate your work as an artist.
Well, of course, he was. Yeah. As time went on, then I was a young actor. I was not doing. I was just studying, and but as time went on, of course, he was proud. I know of my, what happened with me.
Do you have any painting talent?
I'm not interested. I never really concentrated on it. I did study a little bit on a scholarship in music and art for a semester, but I couldn't continue.
What was the most interesting thing for you in doing this?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, to make a film about somebody who is no longer here with us, it's hard to find that person's voice. And he left behind hundreds of pages of journals, and we really felt that we were able to learn about him and understand him in a much deeper way because of his writings. And then, of course, there are these incredible paintings that tell so much. So it was interesting for Gita and myself to be able to piece these various components together: the journals, the letters, the art, and of course, you know, with Bob's interviews.
The studio, you kept it from the. You never changed it. Never changed it.
Never changed it. I mean, I had to do some minor things to preserve things, change the skylight for tinted skylights and pull shades, I think, and stuff like that. But basically, it's what it is. Yeah.
Was there time that you changed your mind about your relationship with him?
No, I just felt that this was a responsibility. As I got older, I would invite his mother, my grandmother. I was very close to her, to openings or his openings, and when even after he passed away, I'd take my younger kids and of course my older kids. And I think I remember we'd take them to shows. As I, started getting into my late 20s, early 30s or mid 30s, and after that, it would be pretty much a tradition of going to openings of his shows, and they'd come to openings of films of mine. My grandmother.
What made him a painter? What he liked about painting? You know, what family meant to him?
Well, I was trying to find people, students of his, and I haven't. Maybe after this comes out, then they'll come out. You know, people that I had maybe met or of the places he taught at, because I know students liked him.
Yeah, we got it. You know, I think I told you about. We had a letter from one student who we actually spoke to, and I love the story because she wanted to let us know that Bob Sr. was so incredibly proud of you that at your first film, he insisted that all of his students go see his son Bobby, the actor. And everybody said, they kind of rolled their eyes, like, we got to go see the teacher's, son in a movie. And they came back like, okay, we saw Bobby, the son, the actor. But that was one of the stories that we were able to find from a student.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, John.
Let me make note of this. The work of Robert De Niro Sr. will be exhibited at the D.C. Moore Gallery in New York from June 6th to July 11th. Remembering the Artist, Robert De Niro Sr. premieres on HBO on Monday, June 9th.